Good morning and welcome to panel 2 of day 3 of our 7th Streaming Media Connect. I'm Eric Schumacher Rasmussen. I am the editor and VP of Streaming Media and the program chair for Streaming Media Connect and for Streaming Media in Person, which we will be getting back to in Boston in May. Streaming Media East will be in Boston on May 24th and 25th with the Content Delivery Summit and Streaming Media University workshops happening in person for the first time in 2 years, more than 2 years, on May 23rd, Monday. So the registration is open already at streamingmedia.com/east, and the programs will be going up very soon. So keep your eye open for that. But we're in the middle of another great virtual week and we're having a lot of fun. We've got a total of 20 some panels, and we end with a workshop on Friday called The Best Streaming Gear and How to Use It. So whatever your interest is in the world of online video, video production, OTT, et cetera, we've got you covered. Also, if you can't make any of the panels live, they will be available on demand once the conference wraps up. And just for being here, you're entered into a drawing to win an Amazon gift card. I'll be announcing the winner at the end of the hour, and the winner will receive an email next week with more information. I'd like to thank our sponsors, our diamond sponsors, that is, Bird Dog and Harmonic, for making this entire week possible, or helping us make it possible. We've got a couple video messages from them right now. And I would like to thank Ateme for sponsoring this panel, which will be all about 5G. Before we dig in, though, a couple of housekeeping notes. If you do have questions for our panelists, please put them in the Q&A rather than in the chat. That just makes it easier for our moderator and I to keep track of them, so we'd appreciate that. Also, we do have live transcripts turned on, so if you're seeing those and want to not see those, you can go to the live transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom window, click on that, and then click on Disable Transcript, and that will turn them off. I think that's it for the housekeeping notes, and so I'd like to welcome our moderator, Brett Sappington from Interpret. Brett, good to see you again. It seems like only yesterday or a half hour ago that I saw you last.
I know, well, the fun keeps on rolling.
It does. Brett has been kind enough to spend his entire morning with Streaming Media Connect. We had a great panel on the future of subscription in a world that's increasingly AVOD and fast. Next session will be about the future of fast services globally, and this one goes in a completely different direction, which I love. We're going to talk about 5G, talk about seeing through the hype, what it actually means for the world of streaming video production, delivery, distribution, and viewing. And so, Brett, take it away.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Eric. This is a topic area that I personally have a lot of interest in. I am a real techie and love getting into the details and seeing how 5G has evolved and seeing some of the potential that it has to really evolve a number of interesting areas related to video entertainment is just fascinating. So my name is Brett Sappington. I'm Vice President of Research at Interpret. Interpret is a market research and insights company based in LA. I'm actually in Dallas, but we're based in LA. I lead the video entertainment research practice. And so that's everything from streaming, pay TV, content creation, and production. So really excited to be here today and talk about 5G and beyond and what it means to you. So let me pull up a few quick data points to talk about what's going on in 5G. So really, we see that there's a lot of potential for 5G in a number of areas to be able to affect a number of areas in the future. So the data that we're looking at here, this is among US gamers. So gaming is one of those areas where latency is really important and where the audience there is very sensitive to it and is very knowledgeable about what latency is and why it's important. And so 69% of US consumers play 1 or more hours of video games each week. This is a survey where we ask consumers about different areas. And so as you can see here, about 45% of gamers play online games with others weekly. Just around 20% say that they're likely to subscribe to cloud gaming in the future. And around 12% say they're likely to place bets on sports when it's available. All of those are areas that latency can impact and where 5G potentially is seen as an interesting way to be able to deliver that. We also see from looking at the data that there's still a lot of room to grow in areas that are important to 5G. So virtual reality is another area that many people talk about as one that 5G, where 5G will be really important in the future. But as we can see, a little under 10% of people own a VR headset today. And so you need to have that for VR to be able to work. And if you're talking about home internet, the ability to deliver internet to individual residences, only around 3% of people in the US have that. And that's really made up of people who have either Verizon or T-Mobile 5G service providing them with home internet access. So we see that there's plenty of room for growth there in the future. So in the panel today, let me invite our panelists to bring up their cameras and audio. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. There are folks that have a really interesting position in the market, and I'm looking forward to an interesting and active panel today. There we go. So let's go in alphabetical order. So Josh, would you mind, alphabetical by last name, Josh, would you mind introducing yourself and what you do at Verizon?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brett. And I'm really excited about, I watched a couple of the other panels and they've been great so far. So I'm looking forward to this event. So I oversee business development for media and entertainment at Verizon. I do a lot of connecting the industry to solutions and really looking at what's happening next. We spend a lot of time on innovation and what that can look like for our enterprise customers, but specifically for media and entertainment and how that world is changing so rapidly right now. And so I help connect those dots across the Verizon ecosystem.
Fantastic. Alex at Ateme, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and your company?
Yeah, so I work today in Ateme. Before that, I used to be in Anivia for more than 10 years. Anivia was a specialist on OTT streaming solutions, so all about video delivery for multi-screen environment. Today, so Anivia was acquired by Ateme last year. So now I'm fully part of Ateme, and I'm actually vice president in charge of video delivery solutions. And the idea is that we address with all the different products and technologies we have in Ateme related to video, we see how we can solve different problems on different market segments. And we see 5G as a market segment with a great potential related to video delivery and more generally speaking to media and entertainment industry.
Great. Brian, would you mind introducing yourself? And to limit it to one organization is a little small for you, given your experience. So,
oh, thank you, Brett. Yeah, so I'm Brian Stevenson. I've been in the media and entertainment space probably for the last 25 years. With the last 5 years focused mainly on 5G and content and entertainment delivery over 5G networks with Ericsson and Nokia. I'm currently a senior technical fellow and founder with a company called Open at 5, where we actually help people monetize, both operators and cloud providers monetize their infrastructure deployments through content delivery and enterprise video. And I'm also a senior technical fellow at the Streaming Video Alliance.
Fantastic. And rounding out our great panel, David, would you introduce yourself and Hub?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me today. Yeah, I'm Dave Tice. I work for a market research firm called Hub Entertainment Research, and our specialty is media and entertainment research. Mostly focused on television and streaming, things that go to a screen that people watch. I'm personally between Hub and previous places. I've been specializing in media technology and how consumers adopt it and adjust to it for 25 years now. So this should be an interesting conversation.
Absolutely. Well, let's begin where so much of the discussion of impact around any entertainment technology evolves, and that is the consumer. So the consumer in 5G, what does 5G mean to consumers other than $500 more for a smartphone?
Well, for our work, I do quarterly surveys and we ask about 5G and right now consumers, they're aware of the term, right? 85% of people have heard of 5G, but then when you drill down a little deeper and you ask them, well, could you describe it to somebody? Only about 25% or so have have firm confidence they could describe to somebody what 5G is. And then, when you ask them about what they expect from it, the people who say they're aware of it, it's almost totally focused on, increasing download speeds to their phone or to their computer or to their tablet. So right now they're aware of the term, but they're sort of very narrowly focused on what I think the marketing has been mostly about, which is increased speed. And I think they have little understanding of everything in the background that could help them, people using 5G behind the screen, so to speak, to bring things to them, on their devices.
Interesting. Anyone else have any more color around that? What do consumers understand the benefits of 5G or what they're paying for?
Well, I think it's at the minute, it's almost like a chicken and egg situation. They see a lot of outlay in terms of service and in terms of new devices, but really there's not a lot of new feature functionality that's actually being delivered with those devices. And I think we're actually beginning to see that change. If you look at a lot of the large operators, and this is really being driven by their 5G group, not necessarily their media and entertainment groups, they're actually looking or beginning to deliver a lot of services around sort of VR and sort of virtual presence within stadiums or events and stuff like that. And that's really, in my mind, it's a little bit of a lost leader to actually get people into the 5G arena, to get them to adopt the devices. But it's also, I think, positioning the operator and the content owner really as or positioning these services really to become monetized, further on down the road. So today they're pretty much prototypes or technical trials that are being delivered. But as the operators really work through this and get them perfected, this is something that's really going to go out and really monetize that investment in 5G.
Interesting. So I know in visiting with many of you before this, as we did the panel preparation call, one of the things that I was interested in hearing from each of you was, in your experience in looking at 5G and being around 5G, a number of you have seen either demos or experiences related to 5G that are particularly compelling. So what's the best example or application of 5G in entertainment that you've seen, and why is that particular implementation interesting to you?
Yeah, so I'll go, Brett. Listen, so I think there's a huge amount of new delivery mechanisms that enable 5G, right? And I think for this conversation, I'll use Super Bowl 56. I think it was a great place for Verizon to showcase how 5G could change the conversation with consumers. we talk a lot about location aware content, right? So as these last mile pipes get really large and you start to think about how you're delivering your experience, especially as a media company, you're starting to think about, hey, listen, I can deliver a differentiated experience inside the venue. I can deliver another experience, at the tailgate in, somebody in a subway moving around a city. And then I can deliver a lean back experience, let's say in the living room, in somebody's house. And so for Super Bowl 56, I think you saw a lot of great technology come to play for folks in the venue. The folks who were sitting watching the game, they were able to experience a Verizon 5G multi-view experience where they could connected with the NFL app that actually got them into the stadium with their ticket app. They were actually able to then take that same app and then go out to a multi-cam experience that showed them really what was happening, different camera angles, very low latency in the venue. And we saw it. We saw an uptick of people, and it may be like Brian's saying right now, people are just trying to adopt and have a feeler for what the technology is going to deliver. But there's no doubt companies like Verizon are putting it into the hands of consumers. Every single person inside of that stadium was able to go into that app and experience this really cool multicam experience. And it's not just that, right? It's also then the consumer at home. They're able to get a different angle on the halftime show. We partnered with Pepsi. We did these cool 360 cameras for the halftime show, all 5G enabled, right? You're bringing these sets out really quickly. You don't always have time to connect every single, cable. You can do that over 5G. And I think one of the core tenets we are looking at from an industry standpoint is how 5G is not just reliable, but it's got committed capability, right? It's got the ability to deliver that high bandwidth. And so although LTE delivered a lot, it for the most part, delivered everything you'd need, 5G really takes it to the next level and then plays on those core tenets like latency. So I think although there might be still like, hey, how does this monetize? I think ultimately we give the tools to the industry and the industry will find a way to make value out of that.
So let me just clear a few categories of things that you just mentioned. So one in the multi-screen, which is the ability to deliver it down to the consumer device from multiple different sources. But you're saying also that, because for those of you who didn't see the halftime show, there were multiple different like miniature buildings. They were all pushed together. So you're saying connectivity-wise, those individual platforms, they were connected by 5G, and cameras and other things on there were captured by 5G to be able to put on the production side.
Yeah, we created a specific VR experience for Pepsi for that halftime show, and it was, I thought it was really cool. You could at home or in the venue literally pan around, see 360 views. So it was a second screen experience along with the main broadcast. And as we're starting to see, and I think it's a really important point, and I think you talked about it earlier, which is, I know that we are being successful. The industry is being successful. Verizon's 5G implementation is being successful when we are not involved in the production, in a broadcast, in an event. You don't have to think that there's something special that has to be done because the network is there today. We're already delivering on it today. And I think that's a really important point. And the consumer, they have the ability, I mean, obviously they need a 5G device, but we're starting to see that adoption pretty heavily. And so we're starting to see more and more of the capability being leveraged.
So Alex, David, Brian, what's an example of an implementation of 5G that you were impressed with, and why?
Well, maybe on my side, I think it's quite similar to what Josh was mentioning, because there is also a collaborative project actually in Europe, in the UK actually, that you might have heard of, which is called Vista, where it's a very similar idea with this kind of multicam view capabilities, the ability indeed to, let's say, upload the video to the 5G network and to do some video processing and then deliver and actually broadcast this content in the stadium. So this is another technological aspect of the 5G network, the broadcast capabilities to address thousands of people in the same location. So this is also something that is interesting, even though, if I might moderate a bit that, it's still at the trial phase. So the good news is there are really a lot of trials happening right now, a lot of field trials happening regarding innovation around 5G. But maybe back to the first question, from an end user and a consumer point of view, for me, 5G today, what I can see is a higher bandwidth, maybe a lower latency, but I don't necessarily see that, maybe on gaming, but it's a higher bandwidth. So my meaning is there are a lot of promises, and I believe that I would say what is at stake here for operators is indeed to be able to make these promises come true. So the end user and us as end users, we really see some different and enriched user experience, as we were mentioning, for example, in stadium or at home or AR, VR applications and this type of things.
Interesting. David, Brian, any thoughts on implementations, particularly something beyond the stadium, which is fascinating, but I think that there's probably more out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, my local cellular provider up here in Canada, again, it's unfortunately we're going back to the stadium, but it is more of a sports application where they're actually delivering content over 5G for baseball, or sorry, for hockey and for basketball. But I think the unique thing is that they're now beginning to combine those sort of 5G technologies with different ways to actually ingest that content, to process that content, and to store it. And so if you look at this particular application, everything is actually stored within a video point cloud. So sitting at home, I can actually position myself anywhere in that stadium. So, you know, behind the goal or at the blue line, and really get a vantage point that I couldn't really get if I was at the game, because I'd be obviously sitting in a designated seat. I think when you look at the future of this, though, and really where they're moving, is you can definitely see things like, you know, full VR and full video rendering delivered into my headset, so my Sony VR2 when I get it, and effectively giving me that experience of not only sitting in the stadium, sitting wherever I want in the stadium, or maybe even standing on ice watching the game, but actually doing that from the comfort of my living room. And I think those services, you know, particularly when you look at COVID and sort of the restrictions around getting into stadiums, I think those services are really game changers.
Interesting. David, any thoughts?
Well, I'll just stick to purely entertainment, which is, you know, I've seen some pretty spectacular drone shows that are promoted to have been, you know, controlled by 5G, so they can talk to each other and talk to the ground. And you know, when you've got 300 of those up there, you know, performing, it's pretty impressive.
Fantastic. I will say one of the most impressive ones that I've seen, and it was actually in a stadium, was the fact that you could have different kiosks, different signage, different things within a stadium, and you could have multi-gig throughput service without having to be tethered to a particular cable, a particular point within the venue. And so it could be much more mobile and portable, which I thought was fascinating. And so we've talked about things related to throughput and to latency related to 5G and how that, and honestly, I have never heard a 5G panel where 5G and latency is not really all that they talk about within that. But I also know that there's more to 5G than, while those are critical and those are really big selling points, what is there beyond that in 5G? What does when it comes to entertainment or just any other areas, what are some underappreciated aspects of 5G that will affect
just the build out, Brett, the build out? I mean, look at Verizon as a perfect example of what it takes to build out a, you know, we'll call it a future-proof 5G network. You know, Verizon bought $1 billion of Corning fiber to build a brand new optical network in North America to then connect all these 5G locations, right? You can't just, you know, you have this great 5G standard that's really going to deliver for years to come. But if you don't invest in the infrastructure, the real estate, the cell sites to do all this, then you're not going to be able to create the density. I mean, look at fixed wireless access, right? Where Verizon now has 900 cities that it's supporting, for fixed wireless access. So all of a sudden, and you and I talked about this in our prep call, you start to go, hey, listen, could it be that we see TVs, we see set-top box manufacturers start embedding 5G modems in their devices? It's coming, right? And so when you get that density of 5G and you start to look at how many devices you can have in a square mile and how much bandwidth you can deliver to those devices, it starts to change the conversation about how you think about devices connected in your home. And so I think we're going to see a lot happening in the next couple of years where it's not just a stadium conversation. Let's be really clear about this. This stuff is happening in the field. David alludes to it with the drones, companies like Skyward, where they are out doing, out of line of sight, over the horizon drone over 5G, where you're sending back live video. If you're a ENG, if you're a news gathering organization and you're out there trying to do breaking news, how cool will it be to have a 5G enabled drone that can be the first on the scene of a breaking news event where you're able to capture, and that can all be coordinated, with other drones all over this 5G network. That's the kind of stuff I think that's really going to be interesting.
That is interesting. So Alex, David, Brian, what are underappreciated areas, or maybe even areas that are misunderstood around 5G?
So maybe if I can comment just on what Josh said again, I think the infrastructure is extremely important. And I think one of the reasons we talk about bandwidth and latency is because somehow it is what is available today for the consumer in 5G. And there are indeed some other aspects, like, having really a standalone 5G network, having a network slicing, multi-access edge computing. All these 5G broadcast I was mentioning, all these technologies will become available when, if the infrastructure is ready. And then it's opening up new applications. It's opening up maybe some, so not only in the media industry, also in transportation, in a medical environment, in many environments. So I think it's really, when the infrastructure is ready, we'll start to see some real new application for end users. Can be TV personalization, can be indeed some kind of replacement to the fiber. The fact we have indeed, well, again, it's related to bandwidth, but the fact we have really high bandwidth makes it a real possible alternative to fixed line network. So I think there is indeed a dependency on the infrastructure.
Interesting. David or Brian?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think one of the exciting things for me is mobility. So now adding the whole mobility aspect to your media and entertainment consumption. And, if you look at a lot of the car manufacturers, today they sell your car and that's it, they walk away. Could you imagine those guys actually building out services now around the connected car? And so effectively it gives them a chance to sell you monthly services and to re-monetize that sale that they've actually made. And on things like cross-country trip, if my kids are in the back seat doing cloud gaming, or they're actually streaming over a dedicated CDN really into that car, for me, that's something I would definitely pay for. And I think when you basically look at a lot of the features that are being rolled out in the 5G networks, particularly around media and entertainment, so new protocols like QUIC or new congestion control algorithms like performance-oriented congestion control, that makes that experience like almost seamless. So as you go from site to site or edge compute to edge compute, that session can actually be transferred seamlessly from one to the other and really give you the same experience that you're seeing within the home.
And Brian, listen, you got to mention open caching, right? Because open caching we're going to see it really expand as an open standard for how you're going to cache that content at the edge.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yep.
Just before you say something, Josh, would you go ahead for those who are not aware of what open caching is? Would you provide a quick definition?
You know what? I'm going to actually let Brian do it because I think Brian's even a better person to represent it. But you do have, I mean, we could all talk about it. Brian, do you want to?
Nice volley. Brian?
Yeah, so open caching is really a set of standards and best practices that we've been working on in the SVA for probably about 5 years. But effectively, it allows operators or other folks to actually deploy an open caching node within their network and be able to actually expose that to content providers. So content providers can actually select the node they want to push the content onto. If it has capacity, they can actually route consumers there. And effectively, it gives them the ability to actually leverage multiple edge caching nodes really deployed in many different operators, really as a single CDN. And so, you know, you can imagine me driving across the US, maybe I'm connected to my Verizon network, maybe I run out of coverage, and so I have to go and connect to AT&T. I can simply be routed to the AT&T network and that open caching node, and my session can continue seamlessly. And again, I think when you look at the operators and the content providers in terms of monetization, it's all shared infrastructure. So the operators are really making money on stuff they've already deployed, but the content owners really don't have to go out, redeploy that, or deploy a very specific instance. They can actually leverage a portion or fraction of that infrastructure that the operator has deployed. And so it's much cheaper for them to push and deliver their content out to the edge.
And Brett, just to add to that, so companies like Verizon have implemented open caching, and we're delivering, you know, Disney Plus and a number of different capabilities across it, and it's creating a dramatic experience improvement for the consumer. And I think that's, you know, that's why the work of the Streaming Video Alliance is so great, because it starts to create an open standard that allows that to happen.
So that's a really, it brings up a really interesting question about consumer perception, because one of the challenges with consumers is you could do a fantastic job of making it seamless, but what you're really doing is you're making it to where they don't notice. It's like you've created a situation where you've optimized it for them, but they may have no idea that that's because honestly, their expectation is I'm going to watch video. I'm going to drive from New York to LA, and I expect that I'll be able to watch it the entire time. They will get to LA and not actually credit anyone with the good experience. So how do you?
Well, and an efficient experience too, right? So you're making good use of your bandwidth, you're making good use of your network. You're really thinking about it. Alex, I know I don't want to keep cutting you off. I know you had some thoughts to add.
No. That's okay. No, go ahead.
So, I mean, that network experience, Brett, is absolutely paramount, and that keeps the consumer, you know, not just connected to their device, but we're going to start seeing it appear in in TV sets, in other types of equipment, and I think that's what's next here.
So,
sorry,
go ahead,
just,
Alex, please.
Yeah, no, just what I don't know, and it's interesting, is that the consumer indeed might benefit of this 5G environment and that mobility and open caching aspects and so on, not necessarily knowing that it's related to 5G. So that's also, I think, the what they see today is well, maybe a new subscription package on their mobile operator, but there are a lot of benefits they will get out of B2B initiatives that the mobile provider will propose to different type of industries, and the consumer will benefit of that, not necessarily knowing that actually it's coming from 5G or it's enabled by 5G networks. So that's also yeah, just additional comment.
So David, talking about consumers. So as we look at consumers, will they notice? How do you make them notice? Will they pay for it? Talk to me a little bit about your thoughts.
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's going to be a lot of this stuff. Consumers have expectations, and they may not be able to tell the difference. I mean, there may be all sorts of wonderful technologies being developed behind the scenes, but to provide a sort of an analogy, it's if you ask people between their HD TV set and their 4K TV set, if they get one, Do they really see a big difference? Are they really willing to pay for that? Most people, they get a 4K set because that's what's out there now. You can't buy a larger set without it being 4K. So I think you're going to end up with people getting handsets or whatever that have 5G built into it, but they won't necessarily be able to parse out that, well, yeah, I mean, I can download a 4K movie in 3 seconds or whatever is promoted. Most people don't need to do that. I mean, it's great they could, but I think you see a lot of areas on the margins where people will see improvement, like if you're in a stadium or if you are somebody who watches, you know, movies on your over a wireless service or things like that. But the vast majority of consumers, I think, is going to be a hard sell, especially given that right now, you know, at least with me, with AT&T, I've got 5G at no extra cost. So if they turn around and say, it's going to cost you $5 more a month, do I really want to pay that if I'm not seeing something really demonstrably better as a consumer?
Which is really interesting because I think in the data we have around consumers, both through qualitative and quantitative, the answer from consumers is, I paid $2,000 for that television. The picture is absolutely better than the other one because it's a new TV. So yes, it is definitely better.
Brett,
so is there that premium perception within 5G for consumers?
I think that, listen, Brett, I think, and I'd love to hear David's thought on this, but I think there's a convergence that we're about to see start happening. You know, Ateme is a great example of, you know, you have to now start thinking about how do your, let's say, traditional broadcast network and your 5G network, how do these now converge? How does it create a differentiated consumer experience? And we're seeing it, right? We're starting to see it with in North America with the ATSC and conversations happening there. We see it with the EBU, you know, and what's happening in Europe with DVB and DVB2. And so I think this is a moment where I would, you know, urge the audience to get engaged. There's a lot of really important conversations happening right now that are going to set the trajectory for the next 10 to 15 years about how this, you know, consumer experience, how the addressable advertising world, how content is received, you know, in all the different locations where you as a consumer might experience that content. And so, David, I'm interested to hear, have you seen any of that convergence from you know, from an analyst standpoint?
Well, you know, I liked what you said about having it built into sets and so forth. I think all consumers, going back to VCRs, right? Nobody likes having extra boxes. And if they can get rid of them, all the better. So, you know, that's why we're seeing people going away from using a Roku or Fire TV, a separate device, to having it built into the set as the operating system. The next step to that, for, you know, despite what everybody reads in the papers, right? A vast, you know, a good majority of people still have cable TV. You know, if they have 5G capability built into their sets, that sort of, you know, takes away the need to connect to, you know, cable or telco or whatever, to be able to get television programming among, you know, the 50 or 55% or so of people who still have that. So there's definitely opportunities to build there, I think.
So are we going to see, at which CES do we see 5G built into TVs? Is that 23, 2025? I can't imagine it would be 26 or 27. You think someone would have it by then? I'm
kind of surprised it hasn't already.
I think it's coming. Yeah, it's coming. So the point, I think, of indeed, like for example, 5G broadcast application. So it's not always, I mean, a technological question, because I think the 5G from the technology standpoint could unify a lot of networks that we're having today, either way, fixed line network, broadcast networks, into a single, let's say, a wireless infrastructure. The point is, you still have regulation in many countries where, and especially free-to-air broadcasting, where indeed you will need to rely on other standards. I mean, can be ATSC, DVB-T, but I mean, yeah, depending on the regions and so on. But so somehow this will need to be discussed between regulators, between the content owners, the TV stations, and so on, to see whether at some point of time relying on 5G infrastructure would be a possibility. I believe some countries will go that way because it makes sense. It also makes sense from let's say an efficiency point of view. Sharing resources, sharing the 5G network resources for multiple applications in the broadcast domain and so on is possible today. So whether we want to do it or not, it's another question, but it's possible.
What about on the video production side? When are we going to start seeing 5G being enabled? We've seen it. We talked about it for the Super Bowl, but that's a pretty premium sports option. When are we going to see it more broadly used in either news production, sports production, any other horse racing? I mean, you've got betting and things like that where latency becomes an issue for that. When are we going to see 5G used in more broadly, and why are we not seeing? I mean, other than just towers being available, why are we not seeing it yet?
Well, your major networks, they have and are deploying 5G. What you're seeing today is it mainly being used behind the scenes, right? As maybe a backup connection, from a router. But what you're going to start to see as manufacturers are starting to get 5G boards into their devices, you're going to start seeing, production quality cameras that are going to have 5G modems directly in the device, whether it's an add-on or you buy it OEM. And that's when I think, and that's coming, that's imminent. We're going to start seeing more and more devices. Listen, look at IRDs. The IRD manufacturers have gotten very serious about, embedding a 5G modem. They're all thinking about how does that support the delivery of either advanced advertising or alternative content, or is that the primary delivery mechanism? So I think to your, production or, contribution side conversation with 5G, there is a lot of adoption, but that adoption today is only slowed down by manufacturers developing technology against 5G. And I think they were waiting for more rollout, but that rollout is here today. So I think it's imminent.
Okay, interesting. So we're gonna, Alex, did you have something to say before?
Yeah, no, I wanted to just add maybe one comment is that regarding the production impact, I think we could make the link also with the cloud, the public cloud environment. Because traditionally speaking, the production was not something done in the cloud. Today, it's moving to the cloud, as many things in our industry, and the cloud is moving down into the 5G networks. So this would also open up some possibilities. I mean, carrying the signal up and down across the 5G network is one thing, but the ability to do some processing close to the venue or the camera and so on, and potentially rebroadcast that on the network is another thing. And having a cloud, a well-known, let's say, public cloud environment, no matter which one, I would say, would certainly help to speed up the development of multiple applications. One of them could be production. So,
yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Sorry, I was going to say, I actually think that's a great point, and we're beginning to see some of that stuff already. If you look at sports contribution over the 5G network, or particularly things like citizen journalism, where you may be in the middle of a protest, you may pull out your phone, decide to go live. At the edge of the network, you can actually do a lot of things like apply brand safety to that content. So you can move swear words, you can actually pixelate out rude gestures, that kind of stuff, and then pass that on to the major networks. And within Canada at the minute, we're actually beginning to see that. Obviously with the stuff that's happening with the truckers, people are actually standing in the middle of those protests going live, and the mainstream media networks are actually picking that content up and rebroadcasting it. So definitely in terms of doing production work at the edge, and particularly for things like brand safety, that's actually happening today.
And I'll just add, LiveView is a great example of that, right? Where you can use multi-access edge compute, right? Like through Verizon, through AWS Wavelength, that product where you can actually do your debonding in the mech, in the edge. And so all of a sudden, as you're bonding multiple cellular signals together, at the camera, and then you're debonding right at the edge, from that standpoint, then you're able to go directly back to your broadcast facility, or you're able to go directly back to your production truck at the venue for integration, or you can continue on to the cloud for your cloud workflow. So there's a lot happening there. And I think, MEC and the edge compute technologies are really starting to be a very interesting capability that are, already today delivering.
Interesting. So we have a question that has come up. How do we use 5G alongside DVB-S2X? Anyone? Anyone satellite? Anyone have any thoughts about any tie between satellite and 5G?
Well, I can. Yeah,
Sorry,
go ahead, Alex. Yeah.
No, go ahead, Josh.
So listen, these are conversations that I think are actually really important. Groups like 5G Mag right now are thinking a lot about how does 5G specific to the 3GPP SA4 working group that helps define 5G impact it. And there's no question that in-flight entertainment could be delivered over 5G. There's no doubt that low Earth orbit integrated with 5G is something that we're going to see. And so it's a good question. I don't know that I would be able to answer specifically to that standard, but what I can say and what I urge the industry to do right now is get involved in 5G Mag, because that standards body that owns 5G right now is asking the right questions for media and entertainment. And that's an important effort that if you are thinking, now's the time to help influence the standard so that these types of integration can happen successfully.
Okay, so I want to move on and we're going to play a quick game of Why Should I Care? And I'm going to name a part of the ecosystem that in the entertainment space, and I'd like someone to tell me why they should care. So we're looking at application of what is it, why should they care about 5G, its rollout and its uses. So let's start with cable TV networks. Why would a cable TV network care about 5G? Gold star to the first one who answers.
Well, maybe I would have one question here, is that maybe depends on the regions in the world, but in many cases, cable networks will have, today they're actually broadband networks, and sometimes they will also have mobile operations. So I don't know if we should separate completely. I mean, the point is, I think before you had networks for video delivery exclusively. I think the trend is that today you have data networks, no matter it's wired or wireless. And somehow it's a matter of convergence also. All this is converging to very high capabilities network that can deliver unique user experience in the media and in the video business. So it could be a threat to cable operators if they do not have any wireless operation, but in many cases they have both of them. So both type of networks.
Okay.
Your comments?
So yeah, just for clarity, whenever I was saying cable networks, I'm talking about the Paramounts and those that have a number of cable channels. Sorry about that. I didn't mean cable operators, though. I mean, in the US market, you have Comcast and others that have spectrum that have their own wireless communications as part of what they do. So I was actually talking about.
I think both of those, the networks and the distributors, are, both going to be open to, more people cutting the cord literally if they go, with something like fixed 5G wireless in their home, and that's how they're going to connect to get their television content if they haven't already cut the cord.
Okay.
And I think too, if you look at a lot of the stuff they deliver over 4G or LTE, it tends to be best effort. So provided the bandwidths are, the network's not too busy, et cetera, you'll get a pretty good experience. I think what 5G does, and particularly when you get into things like network slicing, is it lets me dedicate a certain percentage of that network to those cable operators. And so perhaps for an additional fee on the consumer side, I can actually be guaranteed now of a really good experience and something that's equivalent to what I'm getting from my fixed access provider.
Interesting. So we already talked about broadcasters, and really the broadcasters, it's a lot about live. And we did talk about some live news and picking some of that up for some of the broadcast space. What about studios? Why would a studio, either movie studio, television studio, would they care? Anyone?
Yeah, so they care a lot, actually, because the amount of production that they are doing right now is really incredible. And so to be able to deliver that workflow seamlessly from wherever they produce that content, whether they're shooting a show in Georgia, whether they're shooting something in New York, those production crews could be anywhere. And so you're seeing an extension of the kind of standardized workflow model where they've taken a centralized approach to post, they've taken a centralized approach to, aggregating that content, because they really have to become a factory of the future. That is, I think, a really important thing to, to look at from theatrical and from, all the Netflixes and the Hulus and all these content machines, is they want to leverage 5G because it gives them the flexibility to portability with a lot of bandwidth.
Okay. And we had started out, we talked about TV manufacturers. So I think we've talked about a lot of the different groups within the ecosystem. Let me hop over to some of the questions that we've had come in over the past few minutes. At the start of the webinar, Brian mentioned monetization. How are you seeking media companies? How are you seeing media companies effectively monetize their streams over 5G? Media companies monetizing. Go ahead.
If I can make, I don't know if it's about monetizing directly the 5G for media companies, but it's more about how media companies offering a direct-to-consumer strategy with a direct-to-consumer strategy that might not own the delivery network, indeed might take advantage of 5G network to improve the quality of experience for end users, while potentially paying a lower price for delivery than what they pay today with public CDN and so on. So it's more, I would say, an opportunity, I think, for media company to take advantage of these 5G networks to deliver their content it's an opportunity. I see that as an opportunity, maybe not direct monetization, but better quality of experience, lower cost of delivery.
And I think that's a great point, particularly when you combine it with things like MEC and Edge Cloud, being able to push your caches out into the operator network and then expose that capacity out through open caching APIs, effectively allows more and more content owners to basically get on those networks, to get down close to the edge and really provide a great experience for their consumers.
And so that means, Brett, if you're a vehicle manufacturer and you want to have, like Brian talked about earlier, this incredible experience in the back seat of that vehicle, you can use, edge compute to offload some of the CPU that you might have spent hard dollars on to embed into that vehicle. You can think of the vehicle more like, just a display mechanism and allow the edge to, really own the compute that's needed to create that custom experience.
Mm-hmm. And I think, Brian, we had talked about even not just the backseat and movies and gaming in the backseat, but potentially heads-up displays and other areas for the car where real-time data could be useful to the driver. So we have a couple of questions related to kind of last-mile connectivity for 5G. And some people claiming that there are either what's the opportunity for that last mile for 5G or concerns about not being able to get that, and kind of looking at that last part about getting that in the home. Any thoughts on 5G and the ability for consumers to use that as the last mile data connection?
I mean, I think that's a big opportunity, right? We've got hundreds of thousands, if not millions of homes, rural homes that rely on satellite internet that's barely faster than dial-up. So would this enable, fixed, which you mentioned earlier, Brent, at the beginning, fixed wireless 5G service? Can we get that to some of those homes and, enable them to be able to, connect up to the internet in a way that most of us are used to, and they're still struggling to stream Netflix, right? So I think that's an opportunity.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit, perhaps about struggle, maybe not struggles per se, but innovation. So we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left here of the panel. Where does innovation need to occur in 5G to realize its potential, particularly in the entertainment space? Where do we need to see innovation happen for 5G to achieve its potential? Or are we there?
I don't think so. I mean, I think as operators roll out more and more 5G capacity over more and more areas, we're going to see the network put in place. And I think you're going to see, particularly cloud providers backfilling the edge of the network, and then CDN providers and coding providers, people that are providing production facilities actually go out and populate those data centers sitting within the edge. And I think a lot of that stuff is really available today to some extent. I think the innovation you're really going to need to see is tying all that stuff together, ensuring that those caches will actually run on these smaller footprint cloud deployments that they have, and really making sure that, in terms of orchestrating that and deploying it at the right tier, at the right time, et cetera, that all that stuff is available. And I think there's a lot of thought around that, particularly from companies like Nokia and Bell Labs, and exposing those APIs out to the user. And I think ultimately you're going to see the CDN vendors and encoding vendors utilizing a lot of that stuff to give them scale on demand.
Okay. Anyone else, either obstacles that we're facing or where innovation?
Well, I think network slicing is absolutely going to be one of the most interesting things coming up. And if I said, hey, listen, keep your eye on anything, it would be that. It basically creates a container for innovation, and we don't know all the different ways that it's going to be used. Even early days for how it might be implemented are pretty incredible, and I think it could be a game changer, because it really allows businesses and technologies to be packaged inside of the 5G standard and delivered across the entire network. And that's something that I think I'm watching most carefully.
Interesting. And so just for definition, for those who may not be aware, the idea of network slicing is that you're able to carve out a certain portion of the bandwidth, a certain thread of that, and that's dedicated to either a particular application or a particular element of bandwidth that some company can use, or it can be used for a specific purpose, correct?
I actually think it's even more advanced than that, but yes, you're on the right track.
Trying to get it into layman's terms here. So yes. Alex, David, we just have a moment because the wizard has shown up on our screen. So, so you each have just a quick 30 seconds thoughts on innovation or obstacles.
It's neither innovation nor obstacle. It's more, I think we should see 5G as an opportunity also to resource sharing in 5G network, relying on elastic applications. CDN is one of them, but could be a mix of application, and somehow the impact on power consumption and the green strategy that we are looking at closely on the software designer side. I would say how we can optimize the sharing of this application in this kind of virtualized environment that 5G is offering for edge computing.
Okay, David, you get the last word. Thoughts?
Who's going to come up with a Pokemon Go that's going to really bring consumers to 5G, like
Mm.
it brought people to augmented reality.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, there we go, Eric. We closed with Pokemon Go. You hardly have better than that.
I did not predict that. That was not on my bingo card, but I love it. And I love the way this panel kind of threaded the needle between really technical stuff and, hey, what difference does this make in our lives stuff? So thank you, Brett, and all panelists for making sure that happened. Thank you all for attending. The winner of the Amazon gift card is James Richardson. So James, keep an eye open on your email next week, and you'll get more information about that. We will be back in 30 minutes or so with our next panel, which, if I can remember what it is, yes, it's about the growth of fast services around the world. And Brett, you'll be joining us one more time. All right. See y'all then. Thanks so much.
Thank you.